Today we are looking at the first 12 Marvel comics of the superhero Silver Age. These are possibly the 12 most important historically released comic books from Stan Lee and Jack Kirby starting in 1961. We're going to go through them one at a time. We're going to look at why these books are so historically important, what happens in these comics, what the print runs were, how rare they are, and how much they're worth and how much they've been increasing in value if you are investing or collecting comic books. Normally we say that the Marvel Silver Age began with Fantastic Four #1, but I'm going to go 1 month earlier, and we're going to start off with Strange Tales 89 with a cover date of October 1961. This one came out so close to Fantastic Four that I'm going to include it just to show you what Marvel was mainly publishing at this time. Besides westerns and teen romance titles, they were also very prolific with publishing monster and sci-fi titles. And they came up with a lot of really cool monsters that would later be revised and would become Marvel's early superheroes. One of the biggest Marvel monsters to collect is Fang Fum. And with an October 1961 cover date, that means it was likely on the newsstands in about August 1961. It is the first appearance of the monster Fang Fum. Jack Kirby art. Steve Ditko also contributed art to the interior. Print run estimated at 136,000 copies. That was sort of the standard print run that most Marvel titles had at this time. Marvel was not one of the big publishers in the comic book land at this time, unfortunately. They've now, of course, been #1 for decades, but in the early 60s, they were one of the smaller publishers. But that was about to change when Stan Lee started creating one amazing character after another. Looking at the CGC census over the last decade, you can see this book has really been taking off in demand. Lots of copies getting graded, but very hard to find in high grade. In fact, the highest grade copy is only a 9.0, and there's only 3 of them. This is back when comics still had a 10-cent cover price. Classic cover from Jack Kirby. In the Overstreet Annual Price Guide, you can see we've got examples here of the Annual Price Guide prices for all grades, down from a 2 up to a 9.2. These are raw prices. And you can see the growth in this book has been tremendous over the last decade. It's gone up about 800% in low grade and about 900% in high grade raw. And of course, check out eBay recent sales and the GP Analysis website to find out more current sales, see where the book is selling currently, and also to see what records are being set for graded copies. And looking at the CGC census, we can see only 357 copies graded in total, with only 3 9.0s and 6 8.5s. There is a rare UK price variant of this book, only 3 copies graded, the average grade being only a 3. Well, the Marvel Silver Age officially debuts with Fantastic Four #1. Stan Lee wanted to create a set of heroes that actually had problems. This was something that DC didn't usually do because DC heroes were mightier than you could imagine. But Stan Lee thought, what if we make these characters a little bit more human? And he started that with Fantastic Four, an amazing team of characters. And of course, a historic book right now. Print run estimated at only 125,000 copies. Again, kind of standard print runs for Marvel books were in that area. None were really much lower or higher. They sort of had a flat rate print run that they would do for all their books. So of course, this is the first appearance of the Fantastic Four and Mole Man. And of course, this being one of the biggest books of all time, you can see the CG census keeps growing and growing and growing. And heritage sales as well, increasing constantly. And there is the classic 10-cent cover with white background. Looking at the Overstreet Price Guide prices for the last 50 years, hard to believe that in the very first price guide, you could have bought a low-grade copy for $20 or a near-mint copy for only $30. This book has been growing and growing and growing nonstop at a nice steady pace and high grade for 50 years straight. The only thing you might notice is that there was at one time a market correction, and the price of this book actually fell around 2000 and took many years to catch up to where it had been at its peak in 1995. By 2008, it had finally caught up. So it took 13 years to get back up to where it had been in low grade. In 2012, it fell in price again in low grade. And I remember having a copy at that time, and it was very hard to move it. People just didn't want to pay $2,000 for this book. It stalled for quite a number of years. But of course, in the last 4 years, this book, like all the early Marvel key books, has really taken off. And on the census, we have 2 9.6s, 1,688 copies graded, and 21 copies of the UK price variant, but the average grade is only 3.4. Now, it's going to be interesting. We're going to compare all these key books, and you're going to see which ones truly are rare. At this point, anyone who's selling books for a living, flipping, speculating, will likely have probably got their copy slabbed by CGC. So we're going to be able to get a good guide of really which books are really common and which ones aren't. So looking at our master chart, that was not the only Marvel book published with a November 61 cover date, but it is the only superhero book. And then in December, not a single one. So at this time, Stan Lee decided to keep Fantastic Four going. So at this time, it was being published only once every 2 months. And so for number 2 comes out with a January 1962 cover date, and 1962 becomes an amazingly important year for the history of Marvel Comics. So we're going to look at number 2 here. Not only is it the Silver Age hero comic number 2, it's the first appearance of the Skrulls. And the comic actually came with a pinup of the Thing, which probably will not be found in many of the low-grade issues that are out on the market. Again, print run estimated 125,000 copies. CGC census copies are still getting graded, of course. Heritage is starting to pick up in the number of copies graded. This has a bold yellow background cover. So again, going to be very hard to find in high grade. Very fun cover. Again, in the Overstreet price guide, in the last 20 years, you can see it's doubled in low grade, but it's gone up about 500% in high grade raw. So, and again, constantly moving at a steady pace upwards. There is one 9.8 of this book and 2 9.6s. Again, some UK price variants, but the average grade is only 2.4. So what was Stan Lee up to next? Well, he came up with another new character, which was really at the time not really considered much of a superhero, but sort of one of their typical monster issues, who landed up becoming a popular superhero for them. And that character is AntMan. So Tales to Astonish 27, which usually published monster and sci-fi titles, published the first appearance of Henry Pym as AntMan. Print run estimated of this book was 139,000 copies, because Tales to Astonish was one of Marvel's best-selling titles month to month. On the census, you can see this book truly is a rare book. With the high price tag it has, there should be more copies graded, but there just isn't. There's only 833 copies graded in all conditions, 12 in total 9.0 or higher. Heritage sales, of course, picking up. And of course, AntMan's been featured in a few movies now, so lots of attention for this character. And we're proving that this book is a really rare one. 10-cent cover price. And looking at the Overstreet price guide for the last 20 years, you can see it's gone up 4 times in low grade. But in high grade, look, it has gone crazy. Since the news of the movies coming out, the price has skyrocketed. Plus, the fact is, now that we all know how rare this book is on the census, people are really paying top dollar for the top condition copies. And you can see in the last 20 years, it's gone from $3,000 to $52,000. That is tremendous. That is about, what, 15 times, 16 times the price in 20 years. So that's so far been the best investment book. And on the census, 833 I mentioned, there are no 9.8s or 9.6s, but there are 2 9.4s and 1 9.2. There is a rare Mexican edition, only one copy graded a 4, extremely rare, and a UK price variant, 15 copies in total, but still the average grade still only a 4. So this is a big month for Marvel superheroes because this is the first month that they've released 2 titles in a single month. In February, there were no new books in the superhero genre for Marvel, but in March, we get Fantastic Four #3. So Stan Lee had a lot of faith in this title, and people are enjoying this. This issue becomes the first appearance of the Fantastic Car and the first appearance of Miracle Man. And the Human Torch is drawn with 2 left hands on his cover, if you look closely. Jack Kirby cover art, print run 125,000 copies. Fantastic Four #3 has 956 copies graded, but only 2 9.6s. Another bold sky cover, kind of a light blue background. And in the Overstreet Price Guide, you'll see the book has gone up about 2.5 times in low grade, but really moving in high grades, it's gone up almost, I'd say about 7 times the price in 20 years. And on the census, there is 1 9.8 and 1 9.6. And a bunch of UK price variants, but the average grade again is only a 4. So what happens next? Nothing. April again had no new books. So in May, we get Fantastic Four #4. And this is a very important book. The first Silver Age appearance of the Submariner, who had first appeared way back in Marvel Comics back in 1939. That was the very first Timely comic published. And of course, Timely is now called Marvel Comics by the 1960s. Jack Kirby art, print run still estimated at 125,000 copies. CG Sense is starting to pick up because this is a major key book. But still in super high grade. Again, very hard to find. Notice comics are now 12 cents. They finally officially jumped up. Comics were 10 cents for 24 years. And now finally inflation kicks in. Comics are 12 cents at this time. A bold yellow background cover. All these Fantastic Fours are hard to find in high grade because they all show spine wear so easily. In the Overstreet Price Guide, you can see it's gone up 2.5 times in low grade over 20 years. And again, in high grade, it's really starting to move. It's gone up about 6 times its price. And on the census, 6 9.6s, but no 9.8s at all. And a lot of UK price variants graded, but the average grade is 3.6. Well, May 1963 is an important month for Marvel, not just because of bringing the Submariner back from the Golden Age, but because Stan Lee creates another new character, which had been tried out in a different variation in an earlier issue, but officially gets a new title called The Incredible Hulk. May 1962 cover date, one of the most important comics ever published by Marvel. It is the 6th Marvel Silver Age hero comic at this point. And what can we tell you? Print run again, estimated 125,000 copies for this title. The CGC census, you can see it's steadily moving up. And again, for this being such a big book and such an expensive one, 1,279 copies shows how rare this book really is. 296 copies at Heritage, so that's starting to pick up for sure. There are no super high-grade copies of this book. In the Overstreet Price Guide, this book's really been taken off in the last 20 years. Look at that. It's gone up 1,000% in low grade and unbelievably has gone up 25 times in high grade raw. On the census, 1,279 copies, only 1 9.4 and 6 9.2s. Again, a lot of UK price variants have been graded, but the highest one is a 7.5 and the average is 3.4. Next on our list, we will go into the next month. And Strange Tales is another one of their popular sci-fi / horror series where Stan Lee would just make up interesting characters every month. But this book has been overlooked by collectors for decades, but I'm including it for a certain batch of characters that are in it. And this book is Strange Tales $97. And it has a June 1962 cover date. And even though it's kind of a sci-fi apocalyptic type story, again, a very cool cover, but it has the first appearance of Uncle Ben and Aunt May, relatives of Peter Parker, who has not even been created yet. So this makes this book very unique. Steve Ditko's story. And print run on this title, 136,000 copies. This, again, being one of Marvel's best-selling titles at the time. Super rare on the census. Look at this, only 219 copies graded in all conditions. Heritage has sold very few of them. This book, again, not considered a major key, but it's just been overlooked because it doesn't feature an actual superhero in it, but I'm including it. And in the Overstreet Price Guide, again, it's moving up slow and steady. It has gone up 3 times in the last decade, and in high grade, it's gone up about 5 times. And on the census, very rare on high grade. The best copy is only a 9.2, and there are 3 9.0s. Only 219 copies graded. No UK price pence variants have been graded at all of this book. Next on our list of the 12 original Marvel Superhero Silver Age books, we have Fantastic Four #5. Now this book has been super hot in the past few years because it features the first appearance and origin of Dr. Doom, who is debatably the most important villain of the entire Marvel universe. So not only the first appearance and origin, but it's the second most valuable issue of the entire Fantastic Four run, which has been going for over 60 years. Print run estimate still at 125,000 copies. You can see demand is really driving up the CGC census, over 1,400 copies now. Heritage sales definitely picking up. For this classic cover, which again features a bold light blue background. So again, you're going to see defects very easy. Overstreet Price Guide, in the last 20 years, it's gone up almost 5 times its price. And notice, but it had stalled in 2012, and it sat still for 5 years. There was not any movement at all in low grades. But of course, now it's really picking up again. And in high grade, look at that. It's gone from 3,000 to 28,000 in the last 20 years. So that is 9 times the price. On the census, 3 9.6s, 13 9.4s. And there are 11 of the UK price variants, but the highest one is only about 7.5. So that book has a cover date of July 62, and it's still being published bi-monthly, as is The Incredible Hulk. So we get issue #2 out the same month. So not only, of course, does it feature the second appearance of the Incredible Hulk, but you can see it's got the Toadmen in this issue. 12-cent cover price, gray solid background cover. And again, graded copies, CGC really picking up. Heritage, not too bad, 195. But again, in super high grade, extremely hard to find. The Overstreet Price Guide, over the last 20 years, you'll see it's tripled in price in low grade. And in high grade, though, it's gone up about six times, 600%. And overall on the census, there are 2 9.6s and 4 9.4s, 11 of the UK price variants graded, but the highest is only about a 7.5. So that brings us up to the month of August 1962, which is possibly the most important single month in the history of Marvel Comics. We get 2 of the most important comic books ever published in history. And we're going to start off with Amazing Fantasy #15. Interestingly, this is another one of these anthologies of horror and sci-fi related titles written by Stan Lee. This was the last issue, and he created this character, which he thought was kind of in that vein, a character called Spider-Man. 12-cent cover price. This would be the last issue. That series was canceled after this issue. So this would be the only appearance of Spider-Man, who is Peter Parker. This issue also features the first appearance of J. Jonah Jameson, Flash Thompson, and the Chameleon. Jack Kirby cover art. This is not only the most valuable comic book of the Marvel Silver Age, it is in fact the most valuable Marvel comic of the last 70 years. And in fact, it's the most valuable comic book period of the last 7 years. Print run estimated again at 125,000 copies. Looking at the CGC census, for this being such an iconic, the key book, 2,190 copies is not a lot. And 558 copies. Definitely a lot of demand, of course. Heritage is really picking up in sales. And in super high grade, again, not many copies graded. They're just not out there. Looking at the Overstreet Annual Price Guide, you can see 50 years. Look at this. Hard to believe you could have bought the most important comic of the last 70 years when it was 8 years old for $12 in low grade, or just $16 for a mint raw copy. Now, that was still considered a lot of money at that time because comics in 1970 only cost 15 cents cover price. So to pay $16 is a lot of money, because for that price, you could have bought 100 new comics off the stand instead of just one high-grade copy of this book. But of course, this book has gone crazy through the years. In 2000, though, this book had a market correction and it fell in price in low grades, quite a bit, in fact. And it took about 10 years to recover and get back to where it had been in 1995. So we've already seen this happen with another book. So 1995, prices were really high. Everybody was speculating and the market was really hot in comics. But then we had a market correction in the late 90s. So eventually it starts picking up and it's moving slowly, but surely. It stalled in 2012, but since then it has just gone nuts. This book has been in super high demand the last decade. Looking at the low grades, just in the last 20 years alone, can you believe that the book has gone from 25,000 to 425,000? Unbelievable. So that's 17 copies you could have bought 20 years ago for the same price as one copy is now. The ultimate iconic Marvel Silver Age book. First appearance of Peter Parker. On the census, there are no 9.8s, but there are 4 9.6s. There is a 9.8 that's restored, though, so that's interesting to note. And there's an amazing whopping 46 copies of the UK price variant that have been graded, but the highest is only a 7. And also at that same month is Journey into Mystery 83. Now, Journey into Mystery was another sci-fi / horror monster anthology series that was running month to month. But again, Stanley's starting to catch on that he's got something running with his superheroes, and so he's really cashing in. Why is he doing this? Because they decided that DC was having so much success with superheroes that Marvel needed to try to cash in on this, because most publishers, believe it or not, we're not publishing superhero comics in the early 1960s. Only DC was truly having success with them. So Marvel wanted a piece of the pie. So the last book on our list of the first 12 Marvel Silver Age books, Journey into Mystery 83. Why is it so important? Yes, it is the first appearance of the mighty Thor. And this is Jack Kirby cover art. Look at that solid sky cover again. Almost every one of these books is hard to find in high grade. We've seen that with the census. They're just not out there. They haven't survived because the wear just shows up so easily. This book's a little bit more common, 1,500 copies graded, but only one 9.6 or better. Heritage has really started to pick up on this book. 12-cent cover price, classic cover. In the Overstreet Price Guide, here's the last 50 years worth. Again, you could have bought a mint copy for $10 in 1970. Looking at the prices, they've been slowly moving up and up and up. In 2009, prices stalled in all grades, even high grade. And then after that, it's been slowly moving. And then again, in high grade, it's really been taken off in the last decade. It's been moving like crazy. So in the last 20 years, it's gone from $4,500 up to $86,000 for a raw 9.2 copy. And of course, higher grade CGC copies breaking records all the time. And finally, on our census, there is one 9.6 but 11 9.4s. There is a 9.6 restored copy. There are 23 UK price variant copies graded, but the highest is a 7. And there's also a rare Mexican edition. 2 copies have been graded. Again, the highest is a 7. Now, what I want to do quickly is just compare the CGC census for all these books and see if we notice any other interesting trends with these books. And I think you're going to notice that there definitely is. Okay, so we're going to compare these 12 books. Now, as I say, some of these books are truly first appearance superhero books, and some of them are kind of just close. So you'll notice a big difference in how many copies get graded based on that. So the rarest book on this list for sure is the first appearance of Fang Fum, a monster. Okay. But after that, also Strange Tales 97, right? Because it doesn't have superheroes or monsters. 219 copies graded. So which book features a superhero that's actually the rarest on the census? It is Tales to Astonish 27, first appearance of AntMan. It is the rarest in all grades. So we're talking from the beat up copies up to the highest grade copies. It has the least copies graded on the census. Next after that, Fantastic Four number 3, because it's just not as big of a key book. Next is Incredible Hulk number 2. This is the first Green Hulk issue, 980 copies. So after that, all the others have at least 1,000 copies graded. And the most commonly graded book on the entire list is, you guessed it, it's Amazing Fantasy 15. So the high price tag has drawn out extra copies, 21.90. After that, the most common book on the list, again, Fantastic Four number 1, 1,688, because again, it's one of the bigger books. Of course, big money brings out more copies to get graded. But looking at sort of the average grades, which book has the lowest average of them all? It is Fantastic Four number 1. The average copy graded is only a 3.4. And after that, the Amazing Fantasy 15 average grade copy is a 3.5. So that tells you there is a heck of a lot of low grade copies on the CGC census for the average copy to be a 3.5. Surprisingly, the book with the highest overall grade is Strange Tales 97. It has the least amount of copies graded, but therefore more people are grading just the better copies, and therefore 5 is the average grade of that book. What else do we notice about the really high grade books? Well, you can see how at this point, nobody's speculating on Marvel yet. Nobody's hoarding copies of these books in the early days. Most people, right, are just intrigued by these storylines. They're just reading them for fun. That's what comics were at this time. They were read, they were traded with your friends, they were sold to the bookstore, or they were just thrown in the trash. So looking at the super high grade copies, of course, there are no 10s or 9.9s, but 9.8s are extremely rare. The only books that have a 9.8 are Fantastic Four number 3 with 1 copy and Fantastic Four number 2 with 1 copy. After that, the next most common book would be Fantastic Four number 4. There are 6 9.6s. So there you go. A great summary of the most important first 10 months in the history of Marvel Comics getting into the superhero business in the Silver Age. And eventually Marvel would take over the entire market and become the giant that it is today. Next week, we'll be showcasing the books that come next. So thanks for watching. Please subscribe to this channel. You can learn more about comic book history and collecting comics and investing and speculating at my website, terryhawkness.com, and also at CBSI website, comicbookinvest.com. Thanks for watching.